So in the last episode, I went ahead and removed the fiberglass truck bed, got it all turned around and put back in the garage, grinded down all these crummy welds that I wasn't able to get to, re-welded it back up, ended up finding a bunch of rust, found even more rust, so I went ahead, cut it all out, and matched up some replacement parts. So continuing on from where we left off, I'm going to start tackling the wheel well sections I cut out. I'm going to patch those back in, finish prepping the rear end of the body, and if all goes according to plan, finally lay down a nice even coat of epoxy primer. Alright, let's get to it. Cut this body mount piece roughly to size and left it just a little larger. That way once I was able to tack it into place, I could come back and trim it off the excess by simply following the cutout lines. So moving on to this next section, a little painter's tape and a Sharpie did the trick. I used the tape to get my shape right, then trimmed the sheet metal to match, and got it all fitted up. The original setup had 2 layers of overlapping sheet metal here, but I just decided to simplify things. Just use a thicker gauge metal and welded it in solid. Honestly, it just seemed easier that way. was actually pleasantly surprised by how well the wheel wells came out. My welds are starting to look a bit better. Still a ton of learning to do, but we're headed in the right direction. Then came the part I'd been dreading the most, removing that old tar-like bed liner under the rear firewall. This stuff was brutal, like scraping off baked-on roofing tar mixed with 50 years of grime. Every inch fought back, so had to call in the big guns, the girlfriend. She jumped right in, scraper in hand, and honestly made quick work of it. Definitely helped push this part along. So finishing up the prep work, I can't emphasize enough how long this part took. Getting everything cleaned up underneath the body was painfully slow. Scraping, wire wheeling, sanding over and over again. It felt like forever. Even my dog came out, took one look, and fell asleep on the job. Real management material right there. By the time he woke up, I was finally wrapping up the last stages of prepping the rear end and getting it ready for primer. So as you can tell, I wasn't able to reach every single tight area completely, but I prepped them the best I could and hit any hard spots with a coat of rust inhibitor. Once that dried, I followed it up with some internal frame primer in the areas I knew the spray gun wouldn't reach later on. You can spot that by the green overspray in a few different areas on the rear end. All right, finally time to mix up some epoxy primer and get a fresh coat on this rear section to seal up any of the bare metal. So after the epoxy primer cured, I went ahead and applied seam sealer on the rear section. I had a couple different types of seam sealer, and also the nozzle I was using was just putting out way too much, so it came out pretty ugly, but it's all sealed up, and I plan on putting a coat of truck bed liner over the top of most of this, so you won't even really see it at the end. Alright, so that's going to be it. Everything is primed up and sealed up. As you can see, super ugly, but again, it's going to be all covered up eventually, so I'm not too worried about that. The most important thing is that it's sealed up. Alright, changing gears. This is the original engine out of it. It's 1600cc classic Volkswagen engine, and I'm planning on moving away from this. I actually was able to pick myself up a donor car. As you can see right here, it's a 2001 Subaru Forester. It has a EJ 251 with 120,000 miles on it. The plan would be to remove the engine out of it, pull the wire harness and the ECU, and swap it out into the Baja Bug. What do you think, Tommy? Everything seems to be running great with this car, but we'll see once we tear it apart. Doing this swap, it's going to bring me from 50 horsepower up to 165 horsepower. So it should give me a significant amount more power, yeah, should be a pretty fun project. Tommy, you coming out? All right, that's going to be it for this one. See ya.